Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion, where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome.
I'm Nicole Hilton.
I'm Julia Andreas.
And Julia, have you eaten an onigiri lately?
I actually have.
Oh?
A week ago? Yeah, I think David and I made them for dinner last week.
Nice.
Because they are quick and easy.
They are. They are the Japanese version of a sandwich. I mean, they have sandwiches there too. But in your eating of your onigiri, which if folks don't know, is just a rice ball.
A donut.
No, we don't have time to get into that. Onigiri is just a ball of rice with stuff on the inside, wrapped sometimes in nori or seaweed wrapper. And Julia, have you ever thought about how that nori is made? Or do you know anything about it?
I know it is made of seaweed that has been flattened. And that is basically it. Although I will say I can slam a pack of seaweed snacks like nobody's business. I love those things.
Yeah. Well, you will learn a lot today in today's episode about how nori is made and about other seaweeds as well.
Ooh.
With nori being the focus of the episode. This, I think, is going to be the first in what I would like to be a mini series of what I am calling Japan-isodes, which is a portmanteau of Japan episodes. Folks may remember, or if you know me personally, I went to Japan last September, almost a year ago at this point. Saw lots of cool things, did some food research that I think will all make for very interesting episode material. This episode in particular is inspired by my trip to the Omori Nori Museum in Ota City, which is in Tokyo, which is also where I had my proudest moment speaking Japanese, where I had a wonderful little cultural exchange where the man working at the desk knew a handful of words in English, and I knew a handful of words in Japanese. And so we were able to bridge the cultural divide, and he was able to explain to me, like, the museum is free, here's a map. And I was successfully able to ask, is it okay if I take pictures? And he said, yes, but please don't take video. And I understood. And that was
Wow.
really something, which I know is like, anyone who knows another language is like, you're a baby. But that was the culmination of months of work, I'd like to say.
I'm so proud of you.
So if you get the chance to go to Tokyo, Japan anytime soon, and if you enjoyed this episode, I would recommend you go to the Omori Nori Museum. I will put a link to their website, which has an English page in the show notes. I should also say, as a Westerner born and raised in the United States, I obviously am going to have limited perspective here. I have been in Japan maybe a cumulative total across my life in like 1 month, which obviously they have plenty of rich cultural history that I'm not going to be able to cover from my limited perspective. So think of this as perhaps just a little seaweed snack like you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an entire buffet.
I have never been to Japan, so I will have even less insight
Yeah.
to share.
That's fine.
Except I like nori.
It tastes good. I like
tastes good. You know who else likes nori? My cat.
Huh.
Pom Pom. If you leave that bag of nori too low on the shelf, he will climb up there and open it and eat it.
Huh. Not because it's like a plastic bag, but because he likes the stuff in it.
Nope,
Huh.
specifically for the seaweed sheets. Yes.
Wow. Well, Palm may be an exception among our audience. I think most of our audience is American, and we don't, as Americans, eat a lot of seaweed. And so I'm sure that we probably have a couple of people listening who are thinking like, Nicole, I don't eat sushi. I don't see why this episode is relevant to me. I don't eat seaweed. That's weird. I don't like it. And first of all, I would like to say that Ruth Kassinger, author of Slime, which is a book that I read, has something to say to you, which is, quote, most Americans turn their noses up at edible seaweed but think nothing of eating spinach. I'm reminded that culture dictates which foods we find palatable.
Snaps.
So go ahead and jot that down, that what we like is relative to the culture that we grew up in. And second, you are almost definitely consuming seaweed or it in some way makes your day-to-day life easier and you just don't realize it. So let's just look at one type of seaweed for a second, which is called carrageenan or Irish moss.
Oh, I know that one.
I would like you to read this little paragraph about some of the uses of carrageenan.
Of course. Out of the laboratories and test kitchens of Sara Lee, Betty Crocker, Hostess, Kraft, and Unilever come canned pie fillings, cake mixes, Twinkies, ice cream, processed meats, mayonnaise, salad dressings, artificial maple syrup, candies with liquid centers, toothpaste, shampoos, conditioners, lotions, shaving cream, lipsticks, air fresheners, and many other products, all made possible because of phycocolloids. The paper industry used tons of carrageenan and alginate as sizing to give their products a smooth surface, and textile printers found that phycocolloids prevented dyes from running. The pharmaceutical industry also used carrageenan and alginate as binders to hold pills together. Brewers used it to clarify beer that otherwise had a haze of proteins and polyphenols.
So do you like ice cream? Do you like maple syrup?
Do you like Skittles?
Do you use shampoo or conditioner?
Do you brush your teeth?
Do you brush your teeth? Obviously, not every type of toothpaste has carrageenan in it, but all of this is to say that you are wrong and you should feel bad, and I would like you to apologize to Seaweed. She did nothing to you. Seaweed is also often used as fertilizer and fed to livestock, and also if you eat seafood, any kind of fish, those fish might be eating seaweed. I'm just saying, the world is very large. Obviously, we are not going to be getting into all of these uses today, but I just want to give everybody a sense of how much we, like many other compounds, how much algae and seaweed has sort of worked its way into many of the products that we know and love and use. So, Julia, as you may guess from the paragraph that you just read that had words in it like polyphenols and phycocolloids, this is perhaps going to be one of our most scientific episodes so far. I know this is not a science show, so I'm going to try to minimize that as much as I can. But this was a good exercise for my little brain, which hasn't taken a biology class in at least 15 years.
Oh, God. That makes me feel very old.
But to understand seaweed, we need to do just a little bit of biology, science history, things like that. So there's seaweed and there's algae. Seaweed is a type of algae.
Oh.
So let's back up just slightly more. So there are 3 types of algae, broadly speaking. So we have cyanobacteria, which are just really basic single-celled organisms, kind of your bottom of the food chain. Then we have microalgae, which are slightly more complex organisms. So like I said, if you remember in biology class, how complex is the cell that we're looking at. And then finally, we have macroalgae, which is seaweed. So like a big organism structure thing. We're obviously going to be talking about seaweed today. Algae is not a plant. Seaweed is not a plant. It's sort of like if you've ever heard of how mushrooms or fungi are also not plants. They're fungi. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that. So it's not a plant because it doesn't actually have roots. They have a thing that's similar to roots that's called a holdfast that, now you might guess this from the name, holds the plant down, on the ocean floor, make sure it doesn't just float away. Seaweed also does not necessarily have leaves. They have blades that turn sunlight into food. I realize that it seems very much like seaweed should be a plant. Is why is it that different? I'm not a biologist. Don't ask me these questions. This isn't a science show. I'm just reporting back to you. Seaweed is not a plant.
Would you be able to tell me, it's not just because seaweed is usually in water, right? It is not just plant is land thing, seaweed is water thing.
I believe that's correct. There are plants that live in the water. I did research to the best of my ability. If we have scientists, get in the comments, send us an email, tell us how we're wrong. I'm happy to learn. Breaking down seaweeds, so there are 3 main types of seaweeds, which are very helpfully organized by color and do not have hyper complex names like a phycocolloid or whatever. We have green seaweed, brown seaweed, and red seaweed. Green seaweed, that includes Ulva lactuca, which is also known as sea lettuce.
Sea lettuce?
Yeah. And feel free to like look up pictures of anything as I'm talking. So this is what I think of when I think of like stereotypical seaweed. Sea lettuce is like this bright green, ruffly, like it really does kind of look like lettuce.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about like all the mental visuals I have of seaweed, and it is just like that gently wafting in the current, like sometimes long strands.
Like grasses almost, you know?
Thinking Finding Nemo, thinking the scene in Harry Potter where he has to go save the people underwater and there's mermaids.
I'm weirdly kind of thinking like a hula skirt.
Yeah, like a hula skirt.
That is sea lettuce. There's a couple of other types of green seaweeds that we're really not going to talk too much about them. I am trying to keep us on the track of Nori, which is where this bus that I am driving is eventually going to take us. This is me demonstrating out the window to your left, you will see, and out the window to your right, you will see. But the bus is not stopping. We are going to keep going.
This is not part of the tour.
This is not part of the tour. No disrespect to my queen, sea lettuce, but like we have a lot of other things to talk about. Then we have brown seaweeds, which includes some types of seaweeds that you might have heard of before, such as kelp, kombu, and waka-make.
I know all of them. I know them all.
Yeah.
I know this whole band.
There you go. So kelp, again, is like a thicker type of seaweed that is brown. I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit here. You know kelp. Everybody knows kelp. It's the basis for SpongeBob's favorite cereal, Kelpo.
Kelpo.
So kelp is used, I mean, you can eat kelp like on its own. That's something else I should say is like you can eat seaweed sort of like by itself. There are different ways to prepare it, different ways to eat it, which we'll talk about in a bit. I know that the list that Julia read was technically things that are made with carrageenan, but kelp is also another thing that is often used to make other things. So this stuff called alginate is a kelp derivative, which has medical applications. So it's actually how we make things like sutures and stitches.
Oh.
And it's also how we make vegan casings for hot dogs.
Wow.
So kelp is the reason that I can still eat hot dogs. And I'm thankful. I'm so thankful for that every day.
Every day you wake up and you just send a little thank you to kelp.
Yep.
You got your little kelp shrine. You light a candle.
Every time I pick up a pack of hot dogs and I wonder, can I eat this? And I see the words alginate casing, I think, yes. Yes.
Yes.
I drop to my knees and I cry in my local Safeway. So in addition to being like a seaweed that you can eat, being a substance that we use in medical applications and also hot dogs, kelp is very rich in iodine and actually can be used to treat iodine deficiency.
Wow.
And something I haven't really talked about yet, just as a side note, seaweed is like wicked good for you. Mm-hmm. Like it has crazy amount of nutrients and nutritional benefits. This is because seaweed grows in the ocean, and so as a result it's able to like absorb a lot of the nutrients that are just kind of like vibing, bopping around in the ocean, as long as it's grown in clean water, right?
Oh.
So this is sort of a double-edged sword. So if you grow seaweed in water that is not so clean, it can pick up some of those not so great, like heavy metals and things like that. So when you're buying seaweed, think about where it comes from. One of the books that I was reading, the author was talking about primarily the 3 countries that you're going to get seaweed from if you're buying it here in the United States is Japan, Korea, or China. Japanese seaweed is usually the most expensive, but they have very strict like regulatory laws, so the water is much cleaner over there. Korea is sort of somewhere in the middle. They do have, relatively strict regulation. The water is relatively clean, and it's sort of like middle of the road pricing. And then seaweed products that come from China, because China is pretty lax on their like pollution regulation and things like that. I'm not telling you like don't eat Chinese seaweed because it will make you sick, but like anything else, exercise caution and think about where you buy your products from.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about nutritional benefits of eating seaweed, nori, which we're going to talk about shortly, has, just a quick list here, vitamin A, vitamin B, niacin, calcium, magnesium, cobalt, selenium, iodine, iron, and protein. I think I read that nori is like 50% protein or something crazy like that. So
That's crazy.
yeah. So like I said, seaweed has, kelp in particular, but seaweed in general has a lot of iodine. So if you have an iodine deficiency, something to think about, I guess. In Japan specifically, the folks over there eat so much seaweed that iodine deficiency is like really not a problem. They actually sort of have the opposite problem of like they might be eating a little bit too much and may have a little bit too much iodine. That is like a thing that is a concern over there. Over here in the US, we get our iodine. This probably is also another Girls Lunch episode somewhere.
Yep.
We have added iodine to salt.
Table salt, yeah.
That's to make sure that we get enough iodine in our diet. But we could just be eating seaweed also.
Porque no los dos. I like salt and seaweed.
And having enough iodine in my body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kelp. Kombu, which if you don't eat a lot of Japanese food, you might not have heard of. But kombu is this really thick, brown, kind of sturdy seaweed that is often used to make dashi, which is soup stock. So like if you ever get miso soup or just other types of Japanese soup specifically, kombu is the stuff that's used to like make the stock for that soup. Someday I will do an episode on monosodium glutamate or MSG.
MSG.
Because I also went to a museum about that while I was in Japan. So stay tuned for that. Kombu will come back.
That is a rich text, MSG. There's going to be so much there for that episode.
There is a lot there. The last type of brown seaweed that we're going to talk about is waka-make, which is often used in miso soup and salads. So if you ever get miso soup and you see the little like green pieces floating around in there, that is usually waka-make.
I love that stuff.
If you have ever maybe gone to an Asian market or eaten at like an Asian restaurant and gotten like a bright green seaweed salad that has like little sesame seeds in it, that is probably waka-make. I realize that there is some contradiction here between this is classified as a brown seaweed, but it is often green. I think that has something to do with the boiling or the cooking process. So those are our brown seaweed. We've talked about green seaweed, talked about brown seaweed. We have now gotten to red seaweed, which is where we're going to be talking about the main star of today's show, porphyra, which is used to make nori, and as we've already discussed, carrageenan. So starting with carrageenan, Julia, have you ever eaten or heard of blancmange?
I have heard of it. It is like, I know that it is very dairy heavy. So it's like as if a vampire has heard of Van Helsing. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it is.
Right.
But I know of it, and I am afraid.
Yeah. It's kind of like a pudding. Like if you look at it, it's just like a gelatinous pudding thing.
Okay.
But so if you have ever heard of or eaten blancmange, a primary ingredient in that is Irish moss or carrageenan. It gives it this sort of like slightly oceany taste, apparently. And it's also like a thickening agent, which is why it was used in that like huge list of products that we just talked about earlier. I love, Julia, I know you love this as well, when we're reading through and we see a mention from a friend of the show. I was reading through one of the books for this episode and saw our girl Fanny Farmer has a recipe for blancmange in the Boston Cooking School cookbook. You know she does. She got something in there for everybody.
She got something for everyone. I think she shows up in every single episode.
She's definitely our most consistent guest star, I would say. So we talked about carrageenan a little bit already. We have passed, I think, enough landmarks here on the seaweed bus, and I think it is now time for us to get out and look at nori or porphyra.
Okay.
So, how does seaweed become nori for sushi? Do you know? Do you have thoughts? Do you have guesses?
They harvest it and then they put it in a flattening machine, and then they cut it into squares.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously the first step before you can even think about like, this delicious papery, crispy substance that I may wrap my rice and fish in. Before you do all that, you have to grow the seaweed. And as we've established, seaweed is not a plant. It grows in the water. So you have to grow it in the water. And this is something that took me a while to like wrap my head around of like, how you grow it, where it like come from. And where it come from is spores.
Is seaweed just water mushroom?
Huh. Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's, from what I know, that seems like a fair assessment.
That seems right.
Yeah, it feels right. And
it
so
feels
I think
right.
it is. But yeah, I mean, that generally is how, as I'll sort of talk about in a second, like seaweed grows not from seeds, but from spores that travel around in the ocean and stick to things. Let's say it's like 300 years ago. We want to grow some porphyra so that we can make nori.
Gotta have my nori.
So this is actually getting into like what I learned at the Omori Nori Museum. And they had lots of this equipment on display, so it was neat to like see and sort of figure out the process. So historically, seaweed was grown on these bamboo poles, which are called hebe, which sort of look like a tree or like an upside down broom. So like you have a bamboo stick and then you have these sort of like fanned out smaller like sticks and twigs and things.
Okay.
And you stick the big bamboo stick into the seafloor. And the idea is that because seaweed grows from spores, the idea is like as it's drifting by in the water, it will like catch on these little twigs. It'll stay, it'll congregate and actually like grow into like proper seaweed. And so from there, farmers would then harvest them. Over time, farmers figure out it's actually much more efficient to lay out nets. So like, just picture a big like fishing net and they just lay it out flat. And again, the spores sort of running through the body of water catch on the net and then they accumulate and eventually like grow into, I keep wanting to say plant, not a plant, but grow into the piece of seaweed. And then it is also way easier to just like pick up the net and harvest it that way instead of like kind of having to pluck it off of these reed-like structures. So if you are using those hebe to cultivate seaweed, the way that you would harvest your seaweed is you wade around through the water and like pluck the seaweed off. Depending on how deep the water is, you might have to wear these like super high sandals, which are really more like stilts, which they had at the museum. They were like, you can try wearing these and see how hard it is to walk around. And boy, it is. I don't know how they did it. Not me. If you are using the net setup, you would have to travel around by boat. You'd go around in your little boat and then you'd pick up the net, put it in your boat. Now, this all had to be done extremely early in the morning because the seaweed all had to be harvested, cleaned, and ready for drying when the sun comes up because you need as much of that sunlight as possible to dry it out.
Okay.
So we've now gathered all the seaweed. We take it back to our little house, our little workstation. We then have to chop it up very, very tiny into a paste, basically. Now, historically, again, if we're thinking if this is 300 years ago, we are just chopping up by hand with knives. As industrialization comes along, we then get this sort of like meat grinder type of equipment, where you can kind of like feed it in and then grind it up, which makes things a little bit faster. Nowadays, of course, this is all very mechanized and there's like a giant grinder that does this. So we have ground up our seaweed. We now have a paste. The paste is spread out flat onto a screen and flattened out. So if you have you ever seen people make paper before?
Yes, I have actually made paper before.
So there you go. It's similar to that. So you chop everything up, you make a paste, you spread it out really thin, you squeeze all the water out, and then the last step, of course, is drying. It was dried on the sun in these big racks. If the weather is not so nice out, if it's cloudy, if it's wintertime, we might be using some amount of heat to dry the seaweed, and then it's preserved and it's ready to go. I mean, obviously you need to keep it dry, so you might keep it in like a cabinet or a box or something like that to keep out moisture. But otherwise, it's good to go.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So, in the way that seaweed farming was done, it seems like you didn't really get to choose what seaweed grew. It's just whatever spores caught. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any types of seaweed that are not edible?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, did they have to sort the seaweed once they harvested?
Yeah, so if you're just wild foraging, I imagine you would have to do some sorting, but I think you would generally know what to look for. I mean, like we said, seaweed comes in lots of different shapes and colors, so I think you would probably know, like, what to look for, and it would be obvious if there was something in there that you couldn't eat. Did you have other questions?
Nope, those were my questions. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, we may now continue with the lecture. Thinking again about, like, the history of nori cultivation. So people in Japan, at least Japan specifically, other parts of Asia also eat nori and seaweed, but this is sort of the focus because this is what I know the most about. So people in Japan have been eating seaweed for at least 10,000 years.
Wow.
Which is a very long time.
Yeah.
Seaweed was also routinely offered as like an offering to the gods at Shinto shrines because it was so valuable. How valuable was it? It was so valuable that in the 8th century, this is how fishermen paid their taxes.
Oh.
I know this is true in like European serfdom as well, right? Is like when they come to collect your taxes, you might pay in some portion of like flour or whatever it is that you grow. But yeah, fishermen paid taxes in seaweed.
Really says something that they pay their taxes in seaweed and not like fish.
Yeah, that's very true. For quite a while, nori had this nickname of being called lucky grass or gambler's grass. Because even though I was just talking about cultivation, it took us a very long time actually to figure out how to cultivate nori. It was called lucky grass because folks weren't entirely sure, like, if it was going to come back every year. They didn't entirely know, like, how to grow it, how to cultivate it. They just kind of had to wait and see. You kind of just had to pray, which, as I just said, they literally did. They put it as offerings in the offering helm. Up until around 1600, if you are living on the coast, you're just kind of foraging for it, right? You're just going to kind of grab it. So around 1600 is when Shogun Ieyasu, who is the guy in charge of Japan at the time — we definitely do not have time to get into Japanese politics, the shogun, none of that. That's
no, that is not this show.
No, not this show. But the shogun at the time commanded that he receive fresh fish every day when he was at the palace in Tokyo. And so all the fishermen in the area are like, oh my gosh, how are we going to make sure that the shogun gets his fresh fish every day? So they construct some little pens, just like offshore, sort of like a holding tank, I guess, so that like they always have enough fish. So they catch the fish, they dump in the pens. And because this is like 1600, they build it with bamboo and bamboo stakes. And then they find that after they have made these little bamboo pens, nori, porphyra, starts growing.
Gasp.
On them. And they're like, oh my gosh, we did. Oh, it's here. Oh my God, it's her. What do we do? This is sort of the beginning of like cultivation where folks figured out like, oh, if we put these bamboo stakes in the ground and like the idea of like basically there's just like something here for the spores. I mean, they don't know that they're spores, but like the spores as they're floating along to like catch on, maybe this is how we can grow nori. But they didn't really know much more beyond that. And the mystery of how to grow nori and porphyra is solved, and we will talk about it after the food fact of the day.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So, Nicole, have you ever heard of the phrase 3 square meals a day?
I sure have.
I have also heard it so many times, but I've never actually thought about what a square meal is, like what that means.
It on a square plate?
Well, that could be a possibility. What sort of like food comes to mind when someone's like a square meal?
So my family has a thing. My grandpa in particular felt that, like, it's not a meal if it doesn't have three things. You have to have three things on your plate. You must have, meat, a starch, and a vegetable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got to have those three categories. Otherwise, like, I don't think it's really a meal. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I think, like, in a similar vein, the idea that comes to mind when I consider, like, a square meal is, like, it's balanced, it's nutritious, it's kind of hearty, like, it'll fill you up. It is an all-around, like, fulfilling meal.
It's a way better way of saying whatever the hell my family is talking about.
You gotta have your meat, your
three
potatoes,
things.
and your vegetable. So, like, no surprise, of course, as we find in everything in food history, there is no direct answer as to what a square meal is, like how that phrase came about, only theories. There's two major theories, but I think, like, one of them is pretty debunked. And then we've got, like, a bonus theory. So, theory one is that square, the term square, is a symbolic term, a slang term for something that is substantial, satisfying, and it's just no longer used in today's parlance. I think, like, when we think of the term square, we think of, like, oh, don't be a square or whatever.
Yeah, uncool.
But, you know, you look kind of back into American sort of linguistic history, and square kind of had, like, an opposite meaning, as so much stuff does. Where we, like, flip it and flip it again. And theory two is that there was an actual food square, like the pyramid of today, like the food pyramid of today, or whatever the fuck we've got going on now.
The funnel? You mean the funnel?
Is it a funnel? I don't know.
Everybody keeps telling me it's like an inverse pyramid. It's a fucking funnel, okay? That's what it is when you have a thing that's big at the top and it narrows down. It's a funnel.
Have we abandoned my plate so fast?
We did.
Anyway, so yeah, a reverse pyramid, also known as a funnel. So there was, like, an actual sort of a nutritional guideline in the form of a square, proposed by a British physician in the 1920s. So theory one, the square as a slang term, revolves around the sort of, like, 1800s fascination with squares. This is kind of when we start getting, like, a lot of square cities, blocks, like road patterns. By 1832, the term square was used to refer to, like, the natural, even gait of a good horse, in phrases like a square-gaited horse or a square trotter. We also see it used in lingo to kind of like describing the horse, something that is, like, good and natural.
I've heard a square deal before, which is meant, like, fair deal, like it's reasonable.
And by 1836, we get the term, like, square meal. The term kind of means, like, full or complete. Theory two, which I don't think can be right because, like I just stated, the term square meal was around in 1836. Theory two comes from a British doctor named Plummer. He created a dietary plan that was published in 1928, right? So this is, like, way after the term square meal was around, that organized daily nutrition into 4 squares that made up an even bigger square.
Now, that is quite pleasing to the eye, and I would imagine that the folks in the 1800s who were wild for squares probably were a fan of this. So the 4 squares were not, like, separated like your grandpa would have separated them by, like, carbs, fats, proteins, and whatever else the 4th thing would be. But instead, they were separated out by groups of vitamins. Okay.
I have a link to the visual a little further down in the notes if you want to pull that up so you can see what I'm talking about. So we have four quadrants. In the upper left quadrant, you have foods that have A and or D vitamins. And then going clockwise, a group of B and B1 vitamins. Then I think that says, the visual is very hard to read. I think that says PP or B2 vitamins. And then the last quadrant, bottom left, is C vitamins. Each quadrant lists, like, what foods contain these vitamins and also what foods do not but seem like they would. So for example, like in the vitamin C, it's like oranges, strawberries contain a lot of vitamin C, but like things that do not contain vitamin C would be like dried apricots or things like that. So very, very informational. And then you might notice that there is a circle in the middle of the square of squares that shows like, I don't know how I would describe this, ratios of like like how many.
It looks sort of like a bullseye, you know, with like different levels, different sort of rings.
Exactly, yeah, rings. And it's like the bigger ring is carbs, and then protein, and then fats, and then a weird semicircle for mineral salts.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are. So it is so fun to look at like food nutritional guidelines of the past. And like you can definitely see how this was such a product of its time with like the boom in food science and the understanding of vitamins, where it's like forget those macronutrients.
Yeah.
We gotta really dig in on like vitamins and like which foods have what vitamins, and we're gonna cure everything.
I'm looking through like some of the, like you said, the foods, and there's also some stipulations on here about like carrots, if young, make sure they're young carrots. And then there's another one here. It says green vegetables cooked a short time, all caps, without soda. I'm sure they mean like baking soda or something along the lines, but like
without Coke.
Yeah.
Do
not boil your vegetables in Coca-Cola.
That would be unhinged.
That would be a choice.
Anyway, bonus theory, and this comes from the New Oxford American Dictionary circa 2005, and it says, as a definition for square meal, square meal, a substantial, satisfying, and balanced meal, 3 square meals a day, said to derive from nautical use with reference to the square platter on which meals were served on board ship. Another possible theory, no one can say.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's dig into like, what constitutes a square meal. We have a lot of theories, a lot of definitions going around. I have a list of quotes from various sources about what people throughout time have considered a square meal. I'll read the first one, and then I forgot to highlight it, but I'll have you read the second one, Nicole.
Okay.
So the first one is from Los Angeles Times, 1890. An article called A Cut Rate Dinner, a Square Meal for 15 cents. Soup, any kind of meat, coffee, vegetables, and pie. 15 cents is the red letter sign of a Los Angeles street restaurant.
Okay, so this is from the New York Times in 1897, titled, A Chief of Police Robbed. Terrible. Okay, so the quote says, Franklin, New Jersey. While Chief of Police Lester Kierstead slept the night, a thief paid him a visit. The thief evidently was hungry, for he went into the cellar of the chief's house before starting to look for plunder, and ate a square meal of cold meat, bread, preserves, and fruit. To top it off, he drank several bottles of beer and smoked a cigar. The time that this man had, he was like, I am going to rob the chief of police. But I am going to stop to have a full meal and smoke a cigar at the end of it.
It reminds me of like that meme about like the possum that snuck in and ate like a giant box of jelly donuts.
Yeah.
And then was just like, they found him the next day and he's like, I can't move.
Oh, yeah. Or was this, this could be a different article, but I do remember seeing an article about like, or a news story about like a raccoon that broke into a liquor store and like drank, you know, like a whole bottle of wine or something. And then they just found him passed out in the bathroom. He was fine. He was just drunk as hell.
We've got 2 more. This next one is a bit lengthy. I'll try and get through it as fast as I can. This is from the Los Angeles Times, 1934. Square meal hints offered by Bell Wood Comstock. Try and keep up. To make a meal really square, a 4th group may be said to include the extras and trimmings which greatly vary the caloric concentration of a meal, and which in any particular meal or for any particular person may or may not be helpful. No meal is complete that does not contain a goodly quantity of the first 2. The first 2 were never listed. The amount of the third depends largely upon activity, temperament, weight, digestibility, and appetite. The fourth group may be eliminated with some of the meal still be adequate, but it is helpful generally as a means of furnishing energy, concentration, appetite, appeal, and attractive variation. A practical working out of this plan for anybody will be breakfast, fruit freely in any form, milk or eggs in ample amounts, cereal food. This last varying anywhere from a thin slice of toast, though the many forms of breakfast breads and cereals, to a stack of pancakes, or even donuts. Lunch. Fruit or salad or both, milk of equivalent dairy products, choice of substantials to satisfy appetite, spreads, dressing, etc. Dinner. Vegetables in every and any form.
Ma'am?
Belle Wood Comstock, I don't know what you were smoking. I don't know what half of that paragraph meant.
You have to have these things, but you don't really have to have these things.
The line, in which in any particular meal or for any particular person may or may not be helpful. It's like, yeah. What do you mean?
It's like, these are hard rules, but they are also completely breakable and flexible for anyone at any time.
Mm-hmm. All right, last one for you.
Wait, I'm still thinking about choice of substantials to satisfy appetite.
There's a lot to unpack in that paragraph, but I think most of it is garbage.
Okay, so this last one is from the Los Angeles Times, 1901. Quote, "A square meal is anything you want to eat. It's an old piece of baloney if that's what you want to eat. You can't pass no law to make you eat what you don't want." Well,
yeah. I don't know what law was being passed, but apparently this guy had feelings. I also have a bonus quote. Have you ever heard of the saying, square meals make round people?
Maybe once. I feel like I maybe have heard that one time in my whole life.
I have never heard this before, but the source of this quote comes from a woman in 1920 from a New Orleans States newspaper, where Mrs. August Belmont, apropos of the girls' restaurant strike in New York, said, "I approve of the strike because it was justified. The inadequate luncheons," concluded Mrs. Belmont. "These girls would look like different human beings. Square meals, you know, make round people." And I just feel like there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, first of all, where can I find out more info on this girls' restaurant strike in New York? Is Mrs. Belmont concluding that the strike was justified because of the inadequate luncheons and that these girls should get better meals? Or that the strike against restaurants would help these girls look better because they're not getting round meals? I just have a lot of questions and I couldn't find any answers. I went on a very deep dive, but unfortunately I have to live in the state of Louisiana in order to get into the New Orleans State's newspaper archive.
Curses. All right, if we have any listeners from Louisiana, we need you to pull this article for us.
Please reach out. Anyway, that was my little tangent, but that was our food fact of the day. What is a square meal? Like that one guy said, anything you want to eat.
An old piece of bologna. Although really bologna is round, unless you cut it into a square. So
you can cut it into a square. You can cut it into any shape you want.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm sure, nutritionally, Dr. Plimmer's dietary plan probably doesn't quite hold up if you were to ask a nutritionist or a dietitian today. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to look at, I have to say.
It's very pleasing.
When you were talking about people in the 1800s who were fascinated with squares, I'm like, I think they were onto something.
I was like, you know how satisfying it was to say the word quadrant? It's great.
Oh, yeah.
It's great.
I wish I had more opportunities in my day-to-day life to say the word quadrant.
It's a great word. It's up there on my list of words.
Okay, so now that we know about our square meals and our round people, now that we know about our square meals, let's talk about some square food. And by that, I mean sheets of nori.
Nice.
Smooth.
Good tangent. Smooth. Seamless.
Yes, let's get wiggy with it. Let us talk about the important woman of today's episode, who is named Kathleen Drew Baker. So I have to say, when I was originally researching this topic, I was not sure what the wiggy angle would be. I really wasn't even sure if there was a wiggy angle. I was like, I don't know, seaweed, is there something here? I mean, obviously it's an interesting history and interesting to know about, but like, does it fit within the purview of our podcast? So I was looking around, and then I found Kathleen Drew Baker, who is what this show is all about. It is a girls' lunch classic. This is a woman whose contributions have been overlooked, and yet without her, we would not have the delicious food we have today.
Wow.
When I tell you about this woman, you're going to be like, this is straight down the middle girls' lunch classic.
Get out your girls' lunch bingo board.
Exactly. Have you heard of Kathleen Drew Baker?
I have not at all. And honestly, the more we do this show and we still find women I've never heard of, I'm like, how?
Yeah, it's true.
This is like, we're coming up on what, like year 3?
Yeah. Okay, so Kathleen Drew Baker was born Kathleen Drew in 1901 in England. She's not from Japan at all. She was a very bright student. She went to the University of Manchester on a scholarship where she got a bachelor's and then a master's degree in botany. And this is in 1922, which is pretty trailblazing for a woman to be getting a master's degree at all, especially in the sciences. She does also eventually get a doctorate, which is also really cool. She worked as a lecturer in the botany department at the University of Manchester until she got married to a fellow scientist who is named Henry Wright Baker, which is where she gets the hyphen Baker in her name. After she marries Henry Wright Baker, something happens, and I think it is fascinating how, depending on our subject position, we may describe such an event. So, Julia, I would like for you to read first this one paragraph, which is from the University of Manchester's website, and then I'm going to have you read another paragraph that is describing the same thing, but I think you will see sort of differences here.
Okay. Yeah, I think I also have to correct myself. I think I did come across the name Kathleen Drew Baker when I was doing my botany episode. I think she came up in sort of like a women who benefited from Jean Barret, who sort of like was the first female botanist in like the underneath like the botany sciences. I'm using air quotes there because she was a medicine woman, and then like started the trailblazing for women like Kathleen later. Anyway, let me read those quotes. First quote from University of Manchester's website. She began working as a lecturer in Manchester's cryptogamic botany department in 1922 and would stay at the university for the rest of her life. Her devotion to research is perhaps best illustrated by her working as an unpaid research fellow following her marriage to another academic, Henry Wright Baker, in 1928. At the time, the university, as was common with many academic institutes, did not employ married women.
So keep that in mind. This is from the University of Manchester, where she worked. This article is from the modern-day University of Manchester's website. So now, I would like you to read the article from Ars Technica, which puts the situation a little bit more bluntly.
All right. She had been a lecturer in botany at the University of Manchester, where she studied algae that reproduced using spores rather than flowers. But the university did not employ married women. So when she got married to fellow academic Henry Wright Baker, she was kicked off the faculty and relegated to a job as an unpaid research fellow.
Yeah, so she got fired. She got fired because she got married, which is the part that University of Manchester is like, oh, she was so devoted. She decided to still be an unpaid research fellow. She just loved it so much. And, you know, it was really common at the time for universities not to employ married women. So really, we actually have not done anything wrong here.
Just happened. It just like happened.
It just happened.
To be like
it's
this.
Just so weird.
There's no guilty party.
We had no role in this.
No.
Yeah. Anyway. I just think that's interesting.
Also, like, sorry, I'm so bad. I don't know. We did the whole home economics episode that, like, you know, around the time of the 1920s and, like, pre-World War II, there was this huge boom in women in the sciences and, like, lecturing positions. So, no, University of wherever the butts, Manchester, this was not something that was like super, super common. I mean, it was, but like not every university. Jesus.
Yeah, so it's obviously very dumb. She worked as like this unpaid research fellow, mostly because she was like, I still have work to do. Okay, fine, you're not going to pay me. She sort of, I guess, like pooled some of her resources with her husband and was able to continue doing her scientific work because she's like, fuck you, I still have science to do.
Mm-hmm.
After that, so much like our other botanist friend, David Fairchild, she travels around. She goes to the University of California, Berkeley. She goes to Hawaii, and she collects a bunch of samples for her research. And then she comes back to the UK, and she starts studying algae, which is sort of her specialty. Specifically, she specializes in porphyra. Porphyra, in addition to being found off the coast of Japan, strangely, it is also found off the coast of Wales.
Oh.
Over there, it is not called nori. Obviously, it's called laver. Folks there use it to make this stuff called laver bread, which, as a side note, not bread. Not really bread. It's just a paste that you can put on bread, or some people like make it into patties.
What?
But it's not bread. It's very confusing. Similar to like I was talking about, like when you're making nori, how you like grind it up and then it becomes sort of like a paste that you could like mix it to make it into patties and like fry it, or you can put it on toast. I don't know. I don't know why they call it laver bread because it's not bread. Anyway, this is my own personal axe to grind. But anyway, so up to this point, the exact life cycle of porphyra is still pretty much a mystery, right? Remember I was talking about how it's called lucky grass. Folks really don't know how to cultivate it. They kind of are just putting out some bamboo sticks, nets, and they're hoping that it comes back, even though it doesn't always, right? So usually it like disappears in the summer and then it comes back in like the fall, spring. So basically like the seaweed will come and it's great because then we have nori and then it leaves and then we don't know if it's going to come back the next year. So we're just sort of at the whims of the tides. So Kathleen Drew Baker spends many years researching, testing. She finally figures out the life cycle of porphyra, which, again, you're going to have to bear with me. We have to get into some science here.
Okay.
So porphyra isn't, like, disappearing entirely when it goes away during the summer. It's kind of like hibernating. So the spores are, like, sinking down to the bottom of the ocean. They attach to things like oysters, seashells, and they turn into this, like, pink sludge type stuff. Up to this point, scientists thought that this pink sludge was just like a different algae, just like a different species, and they had been calling it conchocellus. But Kathleen figures out that it's actually the same species. I was reading in an article, it was compared to like a superhero that is never seen in the same room as his like altered ego, right? So like how you never see Clark Kent and Superman in the same room. So it's still porphyra, it's just in a different phase of its life cycle. And the reason that it doesn't always come back every year is there are things like extreme heat or storms that cause the conchocellus to not release and grow into, like, continue its life cycle, right? I guess the little algae spores are like, oh, I don't like what's going on up there. I'm going to hang out down here with the oysters or go elsewhere. So she solves that mystery. Huzzah.
Nice.
So she publishes her findings in the journal Nature, which if you're not a science person, you might not know, that is one of the most prestigious science journals, if not the most prestigious out there, in 1949. She doesn't really think, she's just like, yeah, this is interesting to me as a person who studies algae and probably also interesting to other botanists, and she just sort of like moves on with her life. But it's very important for people in Japan because at this point, Japan is really struggling to cultivate nori, right?
Yeah.
So as I think you're guessing here, Julia, this is immediately after World War II, where the U.S. has been bombing Japan, especially the waterways. The fish supply is not great. That's why there's no seaweed growing because, like, the waters have been so, like, torn up and everything. Nothing is growing. Also, it's immediate post-war time. During World War II, Japanese were starving. So it's not great over there.
Nope.
So Kathleen Drew Baker's research comes at a really critical time for Japanese scientists. And I do really want to highlight, as much as I want to give Kathleen Drew Baker her flowers and say this was a super important scientific discovery, you know, she played a super critical role in figuring this out, I also want to give credit to Japanese scientists and researchers who then took what she discovered and figured out how to adapt it and figure out technology and things like that for their own culture and commercial use and what they needed it for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. They took the Lego blocks, but they are the ones that built the Lego airplane.
They built the Millennium Falcon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kathleen gave them the blocks and then they built the Millennium Falcon themselves.
There's a professor over at Kyushu University named Sokichi Segawa. He reads Kathleen's paper and he's like, oh my gosh, this is huge. Now that we know how porphyra grows, we know its whole life cycle, that means we can probably start actually growing it and cultivating it on our own. We don't just have to sort of wait around and hope that these spores show up and then we have nori to eat. So Professor Segawa is really the one who sort of leads the charge. He takes her research and works with a lot of other Japanese scientists, and they figure out how to grow nori outside of the ocean.
What?
Yeah. So they figure out how to make it grow in a tank, and how to get the spores, and how to get it to go through its whole life cycle and to grow nori. They still use a lot of those methods today. They also figured out how to kind of mechanize the process so that you don't have to, be chopping everything up by hand and drying things out in the sun and all that type of stuff. It sounds like Professor Sagawa, again, I have limited knowledge because I can't really read Japanese, but he seems to have had a pretty extensive career himself. He wrote this book called The Illustrated Guide to Japanese Seaweed, which seems quite extensive, and he has his own collection of seaweeds that's named after him that he cataloged at Kyushu University, which I think is neat. I just think that's nice.
That is neat.
So today, Kathleen Drew Baker is celebrated as a hero in Japan. She has a monument that is dedicated to her at a shrine in Kumamoto. So every year on April 14th, there is also a festival in her honor.
Okay.
I don't know why April 14th. I couldn't get specific. I assume maybe it's her birthday, or I don't know if that's the day that the paper was published. I don't know. But it's April 14th apparently, because of her research, which then led to being able to cultivate nori, which then led to this huge boom explosion in the industry that this is now a major export for the country of Japan. None of that would have happened without Kathleen Drew Baker.
Yeah, girl.
So she never did go to Japan, and she died in 1957, which was only I think less than 10 years after her paper was published. So.
Whoa, wait, that's young then. She was born in 1901, so she died when she was 56.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she died, maybe younger than we probably would have liked. She didn't really get to see the full extent of what her research accomplished. Although, she was a, successful academic and well-regarded and, had a successful career in that sense. But she didn't really get to see, what her discovery meant to, an entire nation of people.
Mm-hmm.
But her children did get to see some of that. She had 2 children. And I would really like to end with this lovely little quote. If you could please round us out here, Julia.
Okay. Drew Baker's 2 children, John and Francis, would later travel to Japan years after their mother's passing, experiencing firsthand the reverence in which she is held. The siblings were mobbed by TV cameras and photographers and treated like celebrities. Her son, John, admits, "I don't think she likes sushi. She wasn't very adventurous when it came to food." That's cute.
And I think I was also reading that her son, John, is also, he also has a doctorate. I want to say he's also a scientist. So, that's cool.
That would make sense, yeah. When both of your parents are accomplished scientists.
Yeah. Going into the family
business. There's a chance you'll do the same, yep. But what a lovely episode, Nicole. Thank you for sharing a lot of information about seaweed that I did not know. I feel smarter and yet dumber at the same time.
It's good, though. I think that means you're learning.
The more I learn that I have more to learn.
Yes, so true.
Thanks for lunching
with us. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. If you have an episode suggestion or want to say hi, you can email us at girlslunchpodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram at girlslunchpod. Thank you for listening.
And is there a fucking hot air balloon outside again?
Somebody parking in your yard.
There's just like a giant circular shadow in my field. I'm like, that's gotta be a freaking hot air balloon. Anyway,